Happy New Year, I am Dylan, this is All You Can Board, and this is the first Marvel Champions video of 2022. It's so good to be back with you guys. I'm so excited to be making these Marvel Champions videos again. The last one we did was the best of Marvel Champions 2021, and the last here we looked at was Valkyrie, so I'm really happy to be back in the saddle, so to speak, with Vision. So Vision is a protection hero in terms of the cards that come in his pack. I have played with him a whole bunch now. He's pretty cool. There's a lot of cool stuff to go over here, some interesting mechanics that are unique to Vision. So we're going to go over every single card like you've come to expect from these reviews by now. I'm going to give you all my thoughts on what it was like to play with them, what my thoughts are on the cards, and also at the end what my thoughts are on the hero as a whole. So let's not waste any more time. Let's kick off 2022 with Vision. Let's jump right in. So the very first card, of course, is the alter ego side of Vision. So this says, I'm going to read the bottom part of this first because then I think it makes the most sense. I almost feel like the bottom part should have been at the top. So setup. Put your mass form upgrade into play, Intangible side face up. So there is a mass card we're going to look at before we even go into the hero side that has two sides to it. One is dense and one is intangible. So that's all you need to know for right now. The rest of his ability says when you are in dense mass form, you get +2 recovery. When you are in intangible mass form, you gain +1 hand size. And note that he only has a 5-card hand size. So to get up to that hand size of 6, you have to be in intangible mass form. So before I even talk any more about this, let's go jump into that mass card, or mass form card, so that you can understand this a little bit better. So we'll start with the intangible side. The intangible side, it is a permanent card. It says Vision cannot attack or defend and reduce the amount of damage Vision takes from each attack by 2. Now this is obviously really good. There's a lot of minions in the game that have less than 2 attack, and it's every single attack you're mitigating it by 2. So there'll be a bunch of minions out where they all do like no damage to Vision. So he's really good, especially as a protection hero, to soak up all those hits, not take a bunch of damage. He has 11 hit points, and they tend not to go down very fast when you're in intangible mass form. So it's obviously very good. The dense form is sort of the offensive version of Vision. So it says while in hero form, Vision gets +2 attack and +2 defense. So obviously I say offensive form, he gets +2 defense, but it's also because he's a defensive hero. This is sort of the side, I guess, if you don't want to look at it as the offensive side, this is sort of when he can actually do what he set out to do. The other side is when you're just going to hunker down, soak up as much damage as you can. Maybe you don't want to flip to alter ego form, but you also don't want to just soak up a whole bunch of damage. So you go to intangible mass form, just be able to take a whole bunch, and the next turn you're hoping to flip back and go on the offensive again or defend. So the response here, which is also really important, says after you change to this mass form, draw 1 card. The reason this is so important is that if you are in intangible mass form and you're in alter ego, you get +1 hand size, which makes your hand size 6. If you switch to hero form and then switch to dense form, you're going to draw an additional card, which means you kind of can coordinate it whenever you want to have a hand size of 7. Really good. Allows you to do a whole bunch of stuff with Vision. There's turns where I was able to play a lot more than I've ever thought I've been able to with other heroes because of having the 7-card hand size and having some of his kit out in play. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind, is that you can time this in a way where you get this extra hand size. Instead of normally having 5, you now find a way to go up to 7. So that is the mass form card. It's going to be referenced a whole lot. It is key to Vision's mechanics, and it's a really cool, it's nothing like earth-shattering in terms of new things being introduced into Marvel Champions. We've seen more unique things introduced, but like, I would even say Spectrum is more unique with her 3 forms than this one, but it does keep things interesting. It does give you, extra strategy to think about of when do I want to flip these forms, as well as when do I want to flip to alter ego hero. You're basically deciding now with 2 cards when do I want to flip. So nothing else really to say about the alter ego side. I will say a recovery of 5 when you need it is ridiculously useful. Again, Vision, in my experience, wasn't taking damage as frequently. I was able to defend reliably because he's a defense hero. I was able to have allies in play to soak up hits. I was able to go to intangible mass form to mitigate damage. There was tons of ways to reduce damage, so I found that I didn't often need to heal, but when I finally did need to do so, jumping in and healing for 5 is a big deal. So all things considered, alter ego is pretty cool, but when we go into the hero side, this is where things get even more interesting. So Vision has 2 thwart, but he has 0 attack and 0 defense, which means that unless you're in dense mass form, he's, I don't want to say useless, but all he can do is thwart. Everything else is going to be completely down to 0. So his density manipulation action is change mass form by flipping your mass form upgrade over, limit once per round. So just like you can switch alter ego and hero once, you can also flip your mass form. So again, a lot of Vision strategy, which I found to be really fun, is deciding when am I going to be in dense form and when am I going to be in intangible mass form compared to when am I going to be in alter ego and hero form. You now have this extra layer to consider. So there's times where I don't want to flip to alter ego because I don't want the main scheme to get any more threat on it. But I also don't want to be able to you know, take a whole bunch of damage unnecessarily, and maybe I'm already low on health, whatever the case may be. So being able to say I'm going to flip to Intangible mass form, every attack is going to be mitigated by 2, and potentially I have allies in play to help me block as well. You can be pretty safe with Vision while staying in hero form, which makes for a really interesting dynamic, because there's times where you also want to go to alter ego form for some of his other cards. So it's a lot to think about. I found it to be a really fun puzzle to solve. And all things considered, generally you'll get a 2/2/2 Vision, which is really good stat line when you're actually wanting to go on the offensive, with usually a large hand size as well. So really, really cool hero overall with his mechanics. Let's jump into his rest of his cards, and you'll start to see how these, you know, the dense mass form and intangible mass form come into play. So the signature ally is Vivian. So Vivian is a 2-cost ally, really good ally. 2 health, 1 thwart, 1 attack. But while you are in intangible mass form, Vivian gets +2 thwart, and while you are in dense mass form, Vivian gets +2 attack. The flexibility on this card and being able to say, what do I need right now? Do I need to thwart for 3? Do I need to attack for 3? Being able to do that twice for 2, you can look at that as doing 6 damage for 2, doing 6 thwart for 2. You can look at it as doing 3 damage and also soaking up a hit for 2. However you do the math here, it's a great stat line for what you're getting out of it. I use Vivian a ton, and as we're going to see with the next card we're going to talk about, Vivian is sort of my go-to to bring back into play as often as I can. In most games, I play Vivian like 3 or 4 times. Again, after you see the next card that comes up that makes that possible. Vivian was just a go-to ally to me. There's other Android allies in the deck. There's other allies that are great, but Vivian is one that I could reliably get out really cheaply and actually make a pretty big impact on the board, especially when playing solo and the villains don't have tons of health. Getting an extra 6 damage in from an ally over the course of 2 turns or whatever the case may be can be really, really useful. So I really, really like Vivian. I think she's a super strong signature ally, and I used her a ton, especially with the card we're going to talk about now, which is 6/1/6 Hickory Branch Lane. So this is a 1-cost support card, alter ego action. Exhaust this card, search your deck and discard a pile for an Android ally, and add it to your hand and then shuffle. So this is really, really good with you know, the deck that Vision wants to have built. So you want to include a bunch of androids, and even if you don't, even if you decide to deck build with a different aspect and not have a bunch of android allies, you will always have Vivian. And Vivian is honestly, in my opinion, the best target for this anyways, and probably the way it was intended to be used the most. I got Vivian. There's another card we'll get to that I pulled a couple times as well, and I'll tell you when we get to it. But Vivian was just such an easy target to go and grab from the discard pile, because I can play her really cheaply for 2, whereas some of the other ones I might be grabbing and saying, well, then I have to save this for a future turn, or I'm using it as just a resource to pay for something else. Vivian was often hitting the table, and I wasn't worried about her dying very often. I would do 3 damage or do 3 thwart, soak up a hit, she goes to the discard pile, and then I use Hickory Branch Lane to bring her back again every time I went to alter ego. This card actually incentivized me to go to alter ego more often, which is a funny you know, balance, because with Vision there's less of a reason sometimes to feel like you need to, because he can take so much damage and not have it actually reduce his health points. So it's really interesting. It's an interesting balance. It was nice to have a reason to go to alter ego a little bit more often, and getting Vivian back that frequently, it just made such a huge dent on the board state. All right, next up we have Solar Gem. This is a 2-cost upgrade. Vision gains the aerial trait, resource, exhaust Solar Gem, generate a wild resource. Couple of thoughts on this card. One, I still think having looked at Vision and knowing the character, and I mean, I don't know him from the comics as much. I know him more from the MCU movies, but I feel like Vision should have just had the aerial trait natively. I feel like Vision flying and being able to just quickly fly, unless in the comics it's somehow tied to this gem, and the idea is that on his hero card he doesn't have it, the Solar Gem. But again, I thought it was the Mind Stone, or it's the Mind Stone in the movies. Probably maybe it's different in the comics, but whatever the case may be, I felt like the aerial probably should have just been something that Vision had natively. It seems to not have the Solar Gem be out and all of a sudden he can't fly seems weird. Again, let me know if I'm thematically just disconnected there. Also, there's no other cards in this deck that come with it that use the aerial trait, so you're really gonna have to deck build to actually take advantage of that. So mostly what you're getting out of this is the wild resource. In that case, it's a boring card, but it's a useful card. To have a wild resource that you can generate whenever you want, on top of sometimes having a 7-card hand, means that sometimes you can have just like so many resources at your disposal to be able to play so many expensive cards in your hand. I've had turns where I play way more than I thought I should be able to with a hero and Marvel Champions in one turn. So it's still a good card, but obviously if you aren't using the aerial, it's a pretty, you know, unexciting card is the best way to describe it, even if it is useful. Next up, we have Vision's Cape. This is a 2-cost upgrade. While you are in dense mass form, gain retaliate 1. While you are in intangible mass form, you gain stalwart. This is a great card. In both forms that I've been in, I've made a huge impact on the board by having this out, because retaliate 1, especially when you're taking a bunch of hits from like small enemies in like Ultron or whatever the case may be, or having to chip away damage, take off tough status counters, or just the slow chip away damage if you're doing a lot of defending. This can add up pretty fast, I've noticed, especially in the games I played. But the fact that when you're in tangible mass form, you gain stalwart and can't be stunned or confused as well is a huge deal, because you're already so protected in intangible mass form. All your damage is mitigated. Yes, you're not attacking or doing anything offensively in that phase or defending, but you're just so protected with stalwart and that mitigation that you can honestly make it. If you want to have a deck where you very rarely or never go into alter ego, you're going to ignore Hickory Branch, then you're going to build your deck around the fact that you're staying in hero form. There's probably a way to do it with Vision where you very rarely, if ever, need to go to alter ego form when you get cards like this out. So really good card. And there's been a couple times where it's been out where the amount of retaliate damage I've dealt and the fact that I wasn't getting stunned when I should have been because of the stalwart was just a huge game changer. All right, next we have 2 copies of Density Control. This is a 1-cost upgrade. Hero response: after you change mass form, discard this card. Add a Vision event from your discard pile to your hand. Great card, and the reason is because Vision has a lot of resources to play with, at least in my experience, especially when he has the 7-card hand going for him and stuff. Being able to pull out the next card we're going to look at, which is his big attack card that costs 3, from the discard pile back to your hand and potentially play it that turn and play it again, is, especially in solo play, such a huge deal, because you're a lot of times with protection heroes in solo, you're doing a lot of protecting and defending, but you still have to find a way to chip damage away. And so games can sometimes last longer because yes, you're safe and you're protecting yourself and everything, but you're slowly chipping away at the damage to win the game. The next card we're going to look at does 7 damage in one swing. Being able to grab that back very often, sometimes that can be the difference to you winning the game or finishing off a villain form. And obviously there's other cards you can grab too. That's just the one I found myself grabbing the most. If you've discarded other cards that you want to use again, or as cards that you didn't mean to discard but they did get discarded, this is a way to grab it, and it's cheap as well. And you get 2 copies of it, so you're going to see it a lot, and you're changing mass forms enough that that's never going to be a barrier to use. Like, you're going to have opportunities galore to be able to do that. All right, next up, 3 copies of a great card called Solar Beam. All I can think of when I hear Solar Beam is, isn't there a Dragon Ball Z Solar Beam move or something? Or is it Solar Flare? That's what I'm thinking of. I think it's Solar Flare. Yeah, it's not Solar Beam. Solar Beam is Pokemon, right? That's the Venusaur has Solar Beam. I grew up with Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z, and my wires are clearly just completely crossed. Solar Beam, anyways, is a 3-cost event. Hero action attack. If Vision is in dense mass form, deal 7 damage to an enemy. If he's in intangible mass form, remove 5 threat from his scheme. I love cards with flexibility like this. I love when you have a card in your hand where normally from other heroes you'd say, oh, this is my attack card, and right now I don't want to attack, so it's just a resource. I love when you have a card like this that you can say, okay, do I want to thwart, do I want to attack? It does both. It's never going to be useless unless you're literally this turn not wanting to do either of those things, and those turns are more rare than not. Usually you're going to be fine doing one or the other. Sometimes you want to do both. That's really the downside. You wish you could do both. But having this card in here and being able to pull it back out with density control is such a huge deal. I was often dealing so much damage with Solar Beam, and also being able to just completely clear schemes with the 5 threat removal for 3 as well. So really key card. You guys know by now I really love my big attack cards, especially when they're outside of aggression where you kind of expect it. So I really like being able to play a protection hero that has 3 copies of a card like this. Okay, Superdense Strike. 2-cost event, play only if Vision is in dense mass form. Hero attack, deal 5 damage to an enemy. This attack gains piercing. 2 resources to do 5 damage. Really good when you already have 3 other cards that do 7 damage for 3. That's 5 pretty remarkable damage cards that Vision has as a protection, or at least in the box as a protection hero. Really, really good. It makes it so that if you play anything other than aggression, he's coming with a prepared kit of a way to do a bunch of damage. So if you're wanting to play just this Vision and all you're going to be doing is thwarting, you feel like here's 5 cards that you can also do a ton of damage with as well. So that's really good. The fact that it has piercing is a huge advantage, and that's where you're going to be sort of relying on this more than you are Solar Beam to make sure that you're not being, hung up by the fact that there is a tough status card on one of these hero or one of these enemies or minions. So yeah, it's really good. You do have to be in dense mass form, but really, it's a light restriction. It just makes it so you can't do anything crazy fancy by being in intangible mass form and still dealing damage. Generally, you're going to be doing your offensive maneuvering when you're in dense mass form anyways. All right, then we have Just Passing Through. This is a 1-cost event. Play only if vision is in intangible mass form. So this is just like the Superdense Strike, but for intangible. And this says remove 3 threat from a scheme, ignoring the patrol keyword and the crisis icon. So 1 cost, remove 3 threat from any scheme of your choice, ignoring both those icons is really good. You do get 2 copies of this. It's really a reliable way to remove threat really cheaply. You have to be in intangible mass form, so it's not one of those things where if you're going on the offensive doing a bunch of attacks, you can just also say, I'm going to remove some threat for really cheap as well. You have to have plan to go into intangible mass form and, you know, be on more of the defensive. But again, you can start your turn in dense mass form, do a bunch, flip to intangible, and then finish with Just Passing Through, and you're protected against the villain. So that's sort of the maneuvering you're doing, is when do I flip my mass forms to be able to utilize these cards in a certain order. Removing that kind of threat for 1 cost and with those conditions, really good. Then we have Phase Disruption, 2-cost event, play only if vision is in intangible mass form again. The hero action is really interesting. Confuse an enemy, choose an attachment on that enemy with the text hero action or hero response, and discard that attachment. This is very situational, but when the situation arises, you're going to be so happy this card was in the deck and in your hand. I don't know that there has been a card in the game yet, and I think I said this in the preview, I can't remember or think of any, that give you an alternative way to get rid of enemy attachments outside of having to do the condition that's on them. You know, it'll say like, use these 3 resources and discard them from your hand to get rid of this, things like that. Usually it's something that you're like, oh, I could get rid of that, but basically I'm spending my whole turn doing that, or you forget about it, you're like, I'm just going to power 3 because I want to do other things. Being able to confuse that enemy for 2, but also just eliminate that card without having to do that condition is such a huge deal. Yes, that card's going to come up when you don't have a way to use it, and yes, you're going to feel like, oh, this card is just, it's just an energy resource. But when it works, man, is it going to work? It's okay. It's not. I wouldn't consider it ever really a dead card. It's just a situational card that the situation might not always present itself, but when it does, you're going to be so thankful that Phase Disruption exists. I use it against Claw, and man, was it just such a lifesaver in that scenario. And then lastly, for the hero cards, we have Mass Increase. This is a 1-cost event. Play only if vision is in dense mass form. Hero Interrupt Defense. When vision defends, prevent all damage from that attack and stun the attacking enemy after that attack resolves. For 1 cost, I just want to stress that. For 1 cost, you prevent every single piece of damage coming towards you, and you stun the enemy. You have to be in dense mass form for this, so you can't be like mitigating that damage in intangible mass form and doing this, which you wouldn't, I guess, want to do anyways. But that is insanely good. There was times where I felt like I was able to stay in dense mass form rather than have to flip to intangible, just because I had this card in my hand and I knew I could stun the villain and eliminate the entire large attack coming through. So Mass Increase, there's a reason there's only 1 in the deck. It is so good. I wish there was like 3 copies. Otherwise, Vision would be the best, one of the best heroes in the game if you have 3 copies of Mass Increase. Phenomenal card in my opinion. Probably one of my favorite ones of his hero cards. Okay, let's jump into the protection cards. Okay, first up is the Ally Jocasta. So this is a 3-cost ally, 3 health, 2 thwart, 1 attack, 2 consequential damage on the thwart. You may play the event attached to Jocasta as if it were in your hand, and the response is after Jocasta enters play, choose a defense event in your discard pile and attach to her face down. So this is essentially having a defense event at the ready that you can play without it taking up a spot in your hand, which is great for something that's situational because you don't have to save it in your hand, taking up a spot, waiting for a situation like that to come up, which normally you wouldn't do. You'd end up just using it as a resource. Now, a card like Mass Increase that we just looked at, you can have attached to Jocasta and wait until the most opportune moment to be able to use it without it taking up a spot in your hand. And sometimes the biggest downside with using defense events is they're great, but then you start your next turn with 2 cards down or 3 cards down, depending how much the card costs. If you put a card like Mass Increase on her, you're only going to lose 1 card from your hand to be able to play it because it doesn't take up a spot in your hand. And then you're going to have a stellar turn probably after you've eliminated all damage and stunned the villain. So a card like Mass Increase is a great target for this. There's other ones as well, obviously, but those situational cards that you don't want to wait to come up at the opportune moment are perfect targets for Jocasta. So I found her to be pretty good. If you don't have something like that in your discard pile or you don't have a really good target, obviously not a good play. So situational in herself as well, but I still found some really good moments where, again, with Mass Increase on her, it was just phenomenal. All right, next up we have Protector. This is a 4-cost ally, 3 health, 1 thwart, 3 attack, but 2 consequential damage on that attack. Interrupt: when Protector would take any amount of damage, spend a mind resource, reduce that amount by 1. This includes consequential damage, so you can reduce that 2 consequential damage to a 1, and any other damage you take that you're, blocking, minion, whatever the case may be, you're reducing it by 1 if you're spending a mind resource. So yes, you're not going to want to spend a whole bunch of cards in your hand, but sometimes you might have a card that you don't need to use because you're going to be you have enough other cards in your hand to play what you want in your next turn, whatever the case may be, that you can spare it. And if you can, to be able to get 3 attack in and not have to take the 2 consequential damage, just taking 1 instead is a big deal. But also maybe you can take a minion hit and not have to have Protector die, and maybe she gets an extra block because of that. It's not a phenomenal card by any means, and it is expensive at 4, as we know with some of these allies, but if you can get it into play, it's going to be a really, really effective card once it is in play. It might just be hard to get it there sometimes. Okay, Victor Mancha. I love this ally. This is the other one I mentioned that I would like to grab with Hickory Branch Lane. So this is a 2-cost ally, 4 health, 0 thwart, 0 attack. Reduce the amount of damage Victor Mancha takes from each attack by 1. This is a pure blocker, which in protection, that's something that is phenomenal. It's super cheap. It has 4 health. You're not going to be going on defensive with it, but I had so many games where Victor stayed out in play for so long because every single attack separately gets reduced by 1. It's not like just the first attack of the round gets reduced. Every attack, which means if you have a bunch of 1-cost allies, have your pick, right? Like, there's so much potential in having a permanent blocker, and I'm not saying it's permanent by any means, but a blocker that can overstay its welcome, I should say, and stay out longer than it should is really, really good. So Victor Mancha was such a lifesaver in many situations. It made me feel a lot safer. This deck has a lot of ways for you to just feel completely safe when you're playing, and Victor is definitely one of them. All right, next up we have 3 copies of Flow Like Water. This is a new protection upgrade, 2 cost. Play under any player's control, max of 1 per player. Response: after you play a defense card, deal 1 damage to the attacking enemy. This is one of those cards that is really, really great if you get it out early. If you get it out too late in the game, or you're drawing it too late in the game, you have to start to weigh how many times this is going to trigger. Is it worth it for me to do this over something else? If you get this out early in the game and it doesn't hinder you from doing something else, I played enough defense events that this added up really quick, and it can be great to, again, ping off tough status and things like that. But generally, just the added accumulation of 1 damage over time, if you're playing enough defense events, will make it worth it. So at that point, if you hit it like, 4, 5, 6 times, you did all that for 2 costs, that's when it's really good. So there's not a whole lot to say there. It really comes down to how early you get that out. I found that if I didn't draw my first one until, like 7 turns into the game or something, I was just, at that point I said, I'm not even going to play this card. I'm going to do something else because I'm already like in the heat of it and trying to finish it off. At least in solo. It'd be different if you're playing a 4-player game and it's lasting longer, obviously. Then we have 3 copies of Defiance. Defiance is a 0-cost protection event. Hero Interrupt. When a boost card on an enemy attacking you would be turned face up, discard it instead. So you have to decide before it turns face up, because you're deciding when it's going to be turned face up. You can discard it. So if you know that, hey, if I draw a certain boost card, I'm dead, or whatever the case may be, you can discard it, and then you don't have to deal with it whatsoever. So it's basically eliminating a boost card for 0. It is going to be situational. Sometimes you'll flip that over, and it would have been a 0 boost anyways, and it doesn't matter. Sometimes it would have been the one that killed you. Mitigating damage in any way is obviously important in protection and just in the game in general. This is doing it for 0. 0-cost defense events are great because, again, you're trying to keep as many cards in your hand as possible so that on your next actual turn you can still be productive. 0 cost means you're only losing 1 card from your hand, which is really easy to do most of the time and still actually be able to do something in your next turn. It's when you're paying for like a 2-cost event that suddenly you're losing 3 cards in your hand, and it's like, what am I going to do with my next turn aside from maybe do a basic attack or something? So I thought Defiance was really good. I used it a few times and I really enjoyed it. I don't know how long-term how many decks I'm going to put it in, but I would say that it's good enough that I would consider it in almost every protection deck I'm building. It just might lose its spot if there's too many good cards I want to fit in. Then we have a basic ally called Machine Man. This is also an android, 2-cost ally, 3 health, 1 thwart, 1 attack. When Machine Man attacks or thwarts, spend up to 3 resources of any type. Machine Man gets +1 thwart and +1 attack for each resource spent this way. This is a phenomenal ally. 2 cost for a 3 health ally with 1 thwart, 1 attack is already, I think, really good baseline stats for a 2-cost ally, especially in basic where anybody can use this card. The fact that it's a really positive ability on top of that, where you can get up to +3 thwart or +3 attack to do attacks or thwarts of 4 multiple times with Machine Man. Yes, you're spending a lot of resources to do it, I get it, but sometimes that little bit of extra damage or a little bit of extra thwart is worth it to be able to say, I'm basically doing 1-for-1 resource for attack or for damage or threat removal on on an ally that only costs 2 and has 3 health. I had so much success with Machine Man, and it's one card that if I'm playing Vision, there's never a time I'm not going to put Machine Man in that deck, because I can grab him with Hickory Branch Lane, and the fact that he's just so good. I would argue that there's going to be tons of decks that just like, yeah, I'll throw in an 2-cost ally that has this much potential. Why not, right? Like maybe I'm near the end of the game and 4 damage makes all the difference. So Machine Man was a great ally in my experience. Then we have 3 copies of Reboot. Again, Reboot. I think I said this during the preview. I just think of the, every time I say the word Reboot, I just think of the cartoon that I used to watch, the CGI cartoon that I used to watch. Like, it's literally the first thought that jumps into my head. 1 cost event, action, ready a friendly android character and heal 1 damage from it. Reboot is really good if you're playing a lot of android allies, in my experience. I think there was one time I used this on Vision because readying him was a big deal, and so I was willing to pay the healing 1 damage on him wasn't a big deal. But on actual allies where healing a damage could mean an entirely new turn, or attack, thwart, longevity, it's a huge deal. And the fact there's 3 in there, sometimes you'll get a couple in your hand and they're ready, and so you can, if you have a couple in your hand, you can do something with them. Have them remove the consequential damage you just put on, then ready them, do it again. Like the Reboot is really good if you have androids in your deck. So I think if you're putting Machine Man in and you have Vivian, it's probably already worth it. If you have even more than that, for sure, I would definitely include Reboot. And I think as we get more androids introduced into the game is when it'll get more interesting, because then even outside of Vision, you're going to start to wonder, maybe I put the android package into this here or whatever. It could be really cool. All right, and then we have the obligation, which is corrupted programming. This is treat your mass form upgrades text box as if it were blank, except for keywords. This obviously really sucks. Basically, it eliminates your entire mass form card when you really think about it. Aside from having to be in forms for other cards triggering, you're eliminating everything that's on them. You have to be in alter ego form to trigger the action, which is exhaust your identity to remove corrupted program from the game. This is a pretty nasty obligation. It forces you into alter ego form to get rid of it. Otherwise, your mass form card is useless, and you have to exhaust to be able to get rid of it. So I had this come out twice in all the games I played, and both times it completely set me back and made me change everything I was going to do, because I was... Yes, it doesn't force you immediately when it gets drawn into alter ego, but without going into alter ego, I felt like I had 0 attack, I had 0 defense. Like, what am I really doing unless I'm just playing cards from my hand and keeping Vision useless on the board? So it really forced me into alter ego and had to alter my plan. So it's a pretty effective obligation in that way, which I like. I appreciate that they should be difficult. Okay, this is going to be interesting. We're going to talk the Nemesis now, and the Nemesis package here. When we talked about Valkyrie, I remember I had thoughts about the Enchantress being included as the Nemesis in the package there, because it was basically the exact same package of cards, 5 cards or whatever it was, I think exact or very close, to the Enchantress modular set that comes in the Thanos box, which to me felt... I don't want to say lazy, because it thematically fits in. It just felt disappointing is the best way to say it, because I wanted something new. I wanted to get something new. So Ultron is the Nemesis here, which Ultron as a character... a phenomenal Nemesis. I was so excited when Ultron, I found out it was going to be the Nemesis for Vision. And the Nemesis card itself is unique, but they bring in some stuff from the actual Ultron scenario. But the funny thing is that I love the way they did it here. I find it, in contrast, I find it different than Valkyrie. So we'll get into it here, and I'll explain why I'm more attracted to the way they did it here than the way they did it with the Enchantress. So Ultron as the minion is a 6 health minion with toughness, 2 scheme, 2 attack, and force interrupt when Ultron attacks you. If Ultron drones is in play, put the top card of your deck into play, face down, engage with you as a drone minion. So Ultron drones, of course, as an environment, and we've already seen that environment. It came in the Ultron scenario, the actual villain scenario, and it is the exact same here. So I'll put it up on the screen, but it is the same as the environment card you're used to. So it just says each face-down drone minion has a scheme of 1, an attack of 1, and hit points of 1, and after a face-down drone minion is defeated, it goes to your discard pile. That environment comes into play as soon as Ultron is brought into play by Shadows of the Past with his side scheme, because the side screen brings it into play. So you're basically getting a mini version of the Ultron villain, but the other 2 cards that come in here that we'll get to, the treacheries, are unique. So you're getting an injection of... This is like a mini version of the Ultron scenario, but the Ultron minion itself is different. The side scheme is unique. The treachery is unique. So it's saying, like, here's a scaled down small version of the Ultron fight that you're now having to do as a side fight to whatever fight you're normally doing. That to me is super interesting. I think that is a really cool way to do it. Had the Enchantress been approached that way, where the Enchantress actual minion card was unique and it just brought in a single element of that, it's different, I guess, because it's a copy in a modular set where this this is copying an entire villain scenario, but I really like the way they did it here. It feels like an injection of, oh, now you're doing a mini fight with this scenario you normally do as an entire scenario. I thought that was cool. So that's Ultron, the Minion, and we talked about the environment. The side scheme that I alluded to is Ultron Unleashed. When revealed, search the encounter deck, discard pile, and a set-aside area for Ultron drones, put it into play. Shuffle the encounter deck. Each player then puts the top card of their deck into play, face down, engaged as a drone minion, and this has an acceleration token that gets put into play as well. So it's not too hard to get eliminated. It only has 3 threat on it, but you are going to want to get it out of there because of the acceleration token, but the Ultron Drone's environment is in play, and it's going to make you have to do a small version of the Ultron scenario, which I think is really cool. So the new treachery is Relentless Android. When revealed, if Ultron Drones is in play, put the top 2 cards of your deck into play face down, engage with those drone minions, 2 cards, 2 drones. Otherwise, if they're not, you don't get off scot-free, though. You have to discard 2 random cards from your hand, which is really bad. Losing 2 cards of your hand, if you have a 5-card hand because of Vision's hand size, it's almost like losing half your hand randomly, which could put you in a position where you have nothing to do on your turn. So really nasty treachery card, really nasty set overall. And again, I find it very interesting how they did this one in comparison to how they did the Enchantress. I hope this is the direction they take when they want to bring, repeat villains or minions back in other ways. I think that this is a better way to do it. And I'm interested to see now, does that mean that we can have other villains that are in the game have mini versions of themselves come in that same way? Are we going to get, a Green Goblin one that brings in aspects of his fight, but just in a mini version? I think that's really cool. Okay, time to talk about the cards that are not part of Vision's set that are included in the pack for you to customize other decks with. First one is the Aggression, 2 copies of Assault Training. We've seen some of these training cards before. This is a 1-cost support, max 2 per deck. Uses, two uses with 2 training counters, I should say. Alter Ego action, exhaust this card and remove 1 training counter from it. Choose an aggression event in your discard pile and shuffle it into your deck. So again, this is a very specific card that if you're crafted an aggression deck that has really key event cards that are often going to end up in your discard pile, you include these so that every time you flip to Alter Ego, hopefully you put it into a hero that is an Alter Ego enough time for this to be useful, to be able to grab that card and put it back into your deck. It's not going into your hand. I said it before. I think I said with the Justice version, I feel like this could have been into your hand. I don't think that would have been too overpowered. I think it would have made it a little bit more interesting. Shuffling into your deck is fine. If you have a low deck, if your deck's already low, you might draw it in the next turn or you're going to draw it soon. But I just think it would have been more interesting for these training cards to actually have it go into your hand and be accessible as soon as you flip to hero form. But I'm not complaining. It's still a good card. I just think it would have been better, and I don't think that would have been too overpowered in my opinion. Okay, then we have Chance Encounter. This is a great artwork on this with Daredevil. We keep getting all this Daredevil artwork, and they're not giving us a Daredevil hero. At this point, I think it's a meme on their end. Like, I'm just going to tease these people with Daredevil as much as I can. 0-cost upgrade. Attached to a side scheme, max 1 per scheme. When attached side scheme is defeated, search your deck and discard pile for an ally and add it to your hand. Shuffle your deck. This is really good. It's 0 cost. You can put it onto any side scheme you want. Generally, you're going to put it onto something that's easy to get rid of or you're going to be getting rid of anyways. And now you get a free tutor for an ally of your choice and put it into your hand directly. So whatever hero or whatever ally is going to help the situation you're in currently, you're going to get for basically exchanging this card for it. The only caveat is you have to beat a side scheme, but you're basically exchanging this card for an ally of your choice in your deck. Really, really good, especially when you have really strong allies that are going to be, board changers or game changers or just give you the extra defense you need. Being able to grab that exact card you need into your hand, can't understate how important that is. Next, we have Joining Forces. This is a really interesting card. 4-cost event, Leadership Alliance. That means players can pay this card's cost as a group. You can share the cost amongst players. Hero action, as a group, the players put a total of 1 Avenger ally and 1 Guardian ally into play from their hands. This seems really, really good to me. And I say seems because I haven't played a multiplayer game yet to test it, and this is really a multiplayer card. But the fact that you can split this cost amongst yourselves means that if each of you guys pay 2, you can now put 2 4-cost allies into play if that's what you have in your hand. So it's situational in the sense of like, what do people have in their hands at that exact moment? But if you have an expensive Guardian ally and an expensive Avengers ally, this is only going to work in your favor, and the cost can be split. So if I can afford 3 and they can only afford 1, now they're playing, what if they have Captain America ally in their hand that's 6 costs, and now they're playing it for 1, right? So there's so many possibilities here. It might be a little bit situational, yes, with what's in your hand, but that is a really, really powerful card for multiplayer, and I love that they're giving multiplayer these specific powerful cards saying you are going to want to deck build with these when you're playing with 2 or 3 or 4 as opposed to solo. I like that they're doing that. Even though I don't play as much multiplayer, I think that's really, really good for the game. Lastly, we have Meditation. This is the basic card, 0 cost event, alter ego action, exhaust your alter ego, play a card from your hand, reducing its resource cost by 3. I love this card. It's a 0 cost event, and you can take another card in your hand that costs 3 or less and play it for free. Generally, you'll obviously want to try to hit the 3 cost to get the max value. You do have to be an alter ego, and you do have to exhaust your form, but there's so many situations where just at the cost of exhausting, to be able to play a card that costs 3 for free is a big deal. Now keep in mind, because you're in alter ego form, you're not going to be doing like a huge attack with this, but this is probably greater or better to be targeted with like an ally or, you know, an Avengers Mancha. Now you're playing for 1 or whatever the cost may be, case may be, I should say. Being able to get some of those key kit cards or key important support cards into play for potentially free because you traded Meditation is a huge deal. So you can go into alter ego and set yourself up for success way better when you have a card like Meditation in your hand. Really excited to try that card out a whole bunch in a bunch of decks and see how much use I can make of it. And that's Vision. Vision is, in my experience, let's talk about overall thoughts. I had tons of fun with Vision. He's not my favorite hero by any means, but he's definitely not, like, I don't consider him a bad hero or a disappointment or anything like that. I had tons of fun. I played him solo, and he's a lot of fun as a solo hero. The thing I like so much about him is I love protection, and what I love about protection is when you can get to that point of feeling like you're not impervious, but no matter what the villain tries or minions try, they can't seem to do anything to you, and you slowly chip away at them. Vision has that feeling, but it doesn't have to necessarily be chipping away. He has these huge attack cards that you can say, I'm taking no damage this turn. Next turn, I'm flipping to Dense Mass and using 2 solar beams because I have the ability to do so, and I'm doing 14 damage to you. So he has tons of power behind him with the cards that are just naturally in his hero cards, but also the ability to mitigate so much damage and remove so much damage from coming in that he's so much fun to play solo. I will say he's pretty straightforward. None of his cards feel overly unique in action. So as you're playing, you're not going to all of a sudden feel like, oh, this is the most unique hero I'm playing. Like, it's just, the cards are what they are. It's a pretty straightforward hero to play. You're doing damage, you're mitigating damage like as a good protection hero. There's nothing that's going to be surprising here. And in that way, it won't be as interesting as playing some heroes that have, you know, counters you're managing on them or whatever the case may be. It's a little bit less involved in that and integrated than that, but doesn't take away from the fun aspect. So in my opinion, Vision is a really fun hero. I don't know where he ranks on the power scale. He never felt overpowered to me. It wasn't like when I played War Machine, I left going, did I do something wrong? Like, why did I destroy that villain? I lost 2 games and I won 2 games with Vision. So it was a pretty even split playing solo. But I played Claw, Rhino, and Ultron. I think I played Claw twice. I can't remember now. But anyways, I had a lot of fun with him. I would highly recommend checking him out, especially if you're someone who likes things to be a little bit more straightforward in what you're doing, but still have enough tweaks to keep things interesting, or if you play a lot of solo, or if you love protections especially. There's tons of great protection cards in here, and especially the new allies. Whenever we get new protection allies, I'm really pumped. Victor Mancha is a great one. I've had tons of fun with him in Vision. I can't wait to try him in other decks as well. So those are my thoughts on Vision. Let me know in the comments what you think of Vision. Have you got him in your hands yet? What are your experiences with them? And how does he compare with other heroes that came out last year? Obviously, this is our first one for 2022, but I'd be really curious to see how he ranks from the other heroes we had announced for so long. Otherwise, so good to be back. So happy to be making these videos again this year. I can't wait until we get all the announcements of everything that's coming, and we finally get the Spider-Verse expansion, Sinister Motives in our hands. So I'm really pumped to bring you guys more content this year. I'm really happy that you guys are along for the ride, and thank you so much for sticking around, leaving comments, watching these videos, engaging with me. Again, it means the world to me, it means the world to us on this channel, and I just cannot stress how much fun I get talking with you guys in the comments and making these videos for you guys. So thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one.